On today's show, episode 21 of the Real Recovery podcast, we welcome Amanda Ireland-Esquivel from True Colors Recovery. Amanda shares her inspiring journey from addiction to recovery, highlighting the vital support True Colors offers to the LGBTQ+ community. We discuss the importance of peer mentorship, overcoming personal challenges, and creating safe spaces for healing and growth. Join us for a powerful conversation about hope, resilience, and the transformative power of community.
Hello, and welcome to the Real Recovery podcast. I'm Julie, your co-host. On this journey of healing and transformation, together with my co-host Peter, we dive into the heart of recovery, sharing stories that resonate with courage and inspiration.
That's right, Julie. Each episode is a new chapter in this vast narrative of recovery, and we're honored to bring them to you. But keep in mind, the perspectives you'll hear are for informational purposes only and may not reflect the views of the podcast or our partners.
Indeed, while these conversations can be a powerful part of your recovery toolkit, they are not substitute for professional medical advice. We encourage you to seek guidance from your healthcare provider for any treatment-related decisions.
And if you're facing an immediate crisis, or if you just need to talk to someone who understands, don't hesitate to call the Recovery Crisis Line at 503-223-8569. That number is also on our website. Help is available 24/7.
Now let's begin our episode
of Recovery, Real Recovery.
Hi, Amanda. We are in Amanda's office for True Colors and so excited. I've been waiting for this interview for a long time, like a year and a half now. So we just want to welcome you to the Real Recovery podcast to tell you it's totally informal. There's no wrong or right. We just want you to share your story and then tell us some more about True Colors. We've done one segment, as you heard, on True Colors, but we're in the month of Pride, and we're really trying to let the community know of all the places they can go to. And for someone who goes to True Colors, we just want to get it out there. You have a lot of different things that you offer.
Yeah, and I've yet to go to an event, but I've been to the facility. It's a great facility, and
Thank you.
I always thought the need for a open and friendly place it was missing, and so it's nice to see that we have that here in Portland. Because otherwise, where do you go? You go to the bars where drinking and drugging, and so I think that's much needed and much welcome. And obviously, it's been such a big success so far. So I'm really glad to meet you and have you on our podcast. And I'm Peter, co-host, by the way, if I didn't introduce myself.
Well,
Yes.
and the one thing we learned out of town when we were at the North Coast Roundup, when we were in the LGBTQ meetings, the saddest thing was there was a lot of people from these little itty bitty towns that didn't even feel comfortable in their town. And we were like, wow, are we lucky? We didn't realize how lucky we were. Welcome.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and excited to share my story and answer any you have for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. We typically like to hear, how your journey began, because everybody's just so varied. And so how did your journey begin into sobriety?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I was born and raised in Oregon, in Southern Oregon, Grants Pass, a really small town. Didn't realize how small it was until I moved up here to Portland.
I bet.
Yeah, but born and raised in Southern Oregon, and I ended up getting into my use really early in age. And for me, I ended up having two surgeries on my ear when I was like 13 years old, where I was prescribed oxy or medication afterwards. And I can remember that was like the first time where I was like, oh, this makes me feel different and I like it. And I just put that in my memory bank and didn't get into active use until I was in high school. I ended up going to high school, started drinking. My excuse was always to be able to work, right? So I used work as another addiction or form of addiction for me. And being young and in high school, I was working 90 hours a week at a McDonald's and then also going to, not 90 hours a week, but 90 hours a pay period. And then going to school and got into heavy drinking. that led me directly into heroin use. For me, the heroin was always something that I wanted to try, strangely, because I looked up to artists and people that had used that in the past, right? So Jimi Hendrix and Sublime and things like that. And so it was always something that intrigued me, I would say. And with that, I ended up graduating high school with a full-blown heroin addiction. I remember walking down to get my diploma, barely graduating because I had missed a huge percentage of my senior year. And I remember being in withdrawals, walking down the graduation ceremony. And when graduation was over, I quickly said bye to my parents and then left to go get well. And that was the start of my adulthood, was directly jumping into that.
Yeah. I'm curious when you used, what can you, reflecting back, what do you think the use was for? For me, it was because I was different and I wasn't accepted in the community that I was in. So that played a big role in me quelling those feelings.
Right.
And I'm always curious if there was a reason or if it was just party. Some people, that's
Yeah, no. So my use has never been surrounded in a social engagement or interaction with individuals. For me, I'm a very reserved individual, and I now realize that I've suffered my entire life with extreme anxiety. So for me, it was a way to go ahead and disconnect and to go ahead and not feel the feelings that I was feeling. And I've always felt that othered emotion inside of me where I didn't belong. I had a small group of friends that I engaged with, but especially with individuals in high school, I think that I was just always like the odd duck out of everyone. And at that time in my life, I actually didn't even identify as being a lesbian or part of the LGBTQ community. I had a family member that was out and not on their terms. He was very feminine and so had always been bullied throughout their entire life. And so for me, that was a red flag as to, I'm just not going to talk about the emotions that I have for others. And so I'm just going to deny it. And that really developed for me into a lot of internalized homophobia. And so I was not a very kind person to the community at that age, or even into my addiction. And that's my honest truth. A part of the work that I do today is making amends for how I treated others in my past. And that was a direct reflection of the self-hatred that I had. When I ended up getting really into my addiction, I was in a long-term relationship with an individual, and it was a really toxic, codependent relationship that led into a lot of crime and homelessness, a lot of harm towards others. And so that's a really big part of my story, is that the unkindness that I had for others. And it was all fueled by my self-hatred and anger that I had towards myself.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I remember there was a guy that this is back in middle school, and we were friends, and he was probably my first gay interaction, but I was so uncomfortable with that in myself that I reflect back on that. I think, God, I treated him so poorly,
Right.
and just, not how anybody should be treated, for sure. And the fact
Exactly.
that he was my friend was even amazing because I really was terrible to him. Yeah.
Yeah, and looking back at how I treated people in general, it's like if you were different, period, I used that or I preyed on that as a way of protecting myself. If I could be mean to you first, or if I could push you away first, then it was, that was the mask that I was wearing. So that way people didn't really know who I was, who my
Right.
authentic self
Yeah.
was. And I had the fear of going ahead and even discovering who I was.
Totally. I still do that. Push you away before I get hurt. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
So as you progress through, how did you find an alternative way to deal with the anxiety and those feelings? And
Yeah, so my recovery began in the most unexpected places. I ended up getting sentenced to prison in 2016. At that point, that's where my sobriety began.
Me too.
Yeah, so it was the removal of my environment, my higher power doing for me what I couldn't do for myself, and then placing me into the care of the Department of Corrections. And when I got into the intake facility or the intake pod at Coffee Creek, I was still doing the same exact things that I was doing out on the streets. I was manipulating people. I was getting medications for Medline that didn't belong to me. And then I ended up landing on a unit after intake and was told that I was invited to someone's table. So in prison or in the women's facility, you have to be invited to sit down at a table or you go find another place to be. And so I was invited to sit with this group of women. And at the time, they were just like, hey, we don't mess around. Like, we're not here popping pills or doing stuff. And so if you want to sit with us, you can't be doing that. Or if you do, that's fine, but you can't sit here. And for one, I didn't want to make friends with new people. And so I was like, okay, let me try this out. And it was my first choice to go ahead and not use. And over time, that ended up growing into wanting to be there for my family. My grandmother was diagnosed with terminal cancer while I was incarcerated, and I wanted to get out and at least be able to spend time with her before I got back into my active use. Yeah. And I ended up meeting women that were doing really long amounts of time that were choosing not to use and choosing not to be in the drama or the toxicity of things. And that really inspired hope for me, was because they had no reason to go ahead and behave or make progress on themselves. They're going to be, some of them are going to be incarcerated for life. Yet they chose a different way. And they had a freedom about themselves that I absolutely wanted. They carried themselves in a way that I respected. And that was my first choice, be like, okay, let me try this way of life. And they really taught me that a revolving door back into incarceration and back out into use wasn't a way of life. And if I had an opportunity to go back and the privilege to go ahead and be released back to my family, that I should probably do something different. And that was my first step into recovery. Wow. Yeah.
Same. And for a long time, we went different reasons completely. Mm-hmm. But at first I was really resentful. They took over $250,000 from my bank account. I was very upset about that. And then they made me pay taxes on it to avoid the racketeering
Insult
charge.
Yeah. Injury.
And I was with somebody who committed murder. That was my first cellmate. And that night she said, "What'd you do?" And I said, "Oh, I owned an escort service or a couple." And she said, "Oh, that's nothing." And she said, "Write an essay. They're going to boot camp." And so I got to go to boot camp and go for a time cut. And for a while, I had a resentment. And then when I went to IOP, not for drug usage, but for stress in the business world, working too many hours, I think it's our pride. I have a really good work ethic and I'm wicked loyal. Mm-hmm. And I think when you have opportunities in your life, you have more to prove. Mm-hmm. And I know that is the case for myself, but I am so grateful now that I had a timeout to see things clearly and the life I wanted, because I don't know. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I wouldn't have stopped had I not had that timeout. Being an IV drug user is serious stuff. Mm-hmm. I wasn't a drinker. I just go to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous because it's for me, but I understand. But it was the turning point for me. I've never been back either. Mm-hmm. I can appreciate that. And especially where you are now. Oh my God.
Thank you. And yeah, it's just it's a big testament, I think, to peer work as well, is because the system and the Department of Corrections wasn't set up to help me, right? They weren't there to rehabilitate me. They were there to punish me. And the punishment was removal from society. And what we know as addicts is that we heal when we're together. We heal when we go ahead and are able to see other people doing the things that we never thought were imaginable. And it was those women that inspired me to go ahead and do something different and really show me a clear lens, or give me a clear lens to my life. And so the importance of that shared or that lived experience is so crucial, because I wouldn't have listened to anybody else. I really wouldn't have. I had really written my life off as, this is my way of life. This is what we do. We go to prison, we come back out. I didn't see anything else different. Relationship peer-to-peer is so beautiful and so important, because that's where the inspiration comes from.
It sounds like that's leading into where you're at today, True Colors, creating that environment for others.
Yeah, I didn't even know that this type of system or support existed. In Southern Oregon, we're really deprived of resources and opportunity. And there's some champions down there that have been providing recovery or treatment services for a very long time. But when comparable to the Portland metro area, they have nothing. I remember the few instances that I was like, oh, maybe I can go to detox. The closest detox available to me was in Eugene, right? It was, I think, the Betty Ford or something like that. And so you have to travel for your treatment. And I wasn't willing to do that at that time. I'm a big dog person and I had a dog. And I was like, yeah, that's not happening. I'm not giving my dog up. I was willing to stay in my addiction for longer because of that. And moving up here and seeing like the web of peers that has been formed up here is amazing. I was miserably working at a UPS site before starting to work at 4D Recovery, and I was like, okay, I'll go try this peer stuff. I don't want to work in the recovery field. That's not me. I'm going to go and make amazing designs for Nike or Adidas through graphic design or something. Yeah, and the longer
Nike
I was
was
in...
always my dream job. Totally.
Yeah, and the longer that I was in college, the more I realized I didn't care about making designs for million-dollar companies, and I think I got the bug, the peer bug, and I was just like, this is where my passion lies. This is where I can make the biggest impact, and I can use the skills that I've used or developed in college to be able to apply to the field. And yeah, it's been a really beautiful journey to even just realize that peers exist and seeing the impact one-on-one.
Can you tell me about peers?
Yeah, peer mentors, individuals with lived experience providing support to individuals that are suffering from their substance use or alcohol use disorder. And I was hired at 4D as a peer mentor, and I didn't know what I was doing. I had never worked in the recovery field before. I took a 40-hour class and got thrown into the field and was just like, okay, so they trust me to help people. Awesome. And what I ended up finding out is that showing up with lived experience and just meeting people where they're at is enough, and everything else we can learn on the go. And I've been able to form relationships with individuals that are suffering in their recovery, and help them identify a recovery pathway that's best for them, help them walk through their personal recovery journey, and stepping back and realizing that there's a diverse amount of ways to go ahead and recover, and my way isn't always the best way for everyone. So let's go ahead and center the individual. Yeah.
That's what we've been seeing. Mm-hmm. That's why we try to approach it from a whole bunch of different stories. That, just because one worked for me doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Yeah. And then a lot of people have opportunities with the higher power, mm-hmm. or the word God, mm-hmm. especially with some of the trauma they've been through. And I think that really going to that class, I just went to that class last week, and you were part of my class, but
you taught in the class, right?
Yeah. So I've been teaching a section of the recovery mentor certification for almost the last, like maybe 2 years now. So the certification that we train for is within Oregon. Individuals can pursue their CRM2, which I believe is a national accreditation.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Cool. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but going to the class really opened my mind to a lot of things. Mm-hmm. A mentor is not a sponsor. Mm-hmm. Two different roles completely. It was very enlightening, very much. So how did you get from 4D to True Colors?
Yeah, 4D was really the stepping stone and an opportunity that allowed True Colors to even exist. So when I met Tony, and was a special project. When I first started at 4D, I was given the opportunity to serve my community. And so he's like, hey, we see that there's a high need for individuals within the LGBTQ plus community. I need you to show that. I need you to show the data. I need you to learn. I need you to get good at what you do. And if you work hard enough and you show up, maybe there'll be an opportunity in the future for something bigger. And over time, I ended up building a really large caseload with individuals, and
caseload.
Yeah, I had a really large. I think at one time I was serving 30 individuals,
wow.
All identifying within the LGBTQ community. We saw percentages of transgender and gender diverse individuals coming to services at a lot higher rate. And from that data, we were able to go ahead and write a grant to CARE Oregon to request that we start a new organization. And Tony wrote that grant with the data that I was able to go ahead and provide, and we got that opportunity.
I love that.
Yeah. So it's been a really strong collaboration with 4D for a long time, and I 100% and always will be grateful for their guidance and support. It's just, I've never met a person or an organization that is willing to go ahead and be like, hey, I don't care if we get all the money in our pocket or not. This community needs help. Let's get you to a point where you can help them without feeling like we're competing against things or feeling like who can grab the biggest pot. It's no, this is the problem. This is a possible solution. Let's try to invest in that instead and really be collaborative. And I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from that framework or that model.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what we've seen. And the reason for, we have other stories, but the reason for GTD, right? There's room for that. There's room for 4D. There's room for the Indian culture. There's enough people to recover in Oregon that we can spread the wealth, but not enough places for them to go. Portland is so lucky. They're not lucky in having one of the highest addiction rates and the least treatment services available, but they're lucky with the diversity here.
Yeah.
And the acceptance. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think. Although I'm on the fringe of Gresham, so I see a little bit of that.
Right.
I live off 138th and
The
Division.
conservative side.
I know the difference between a gunshot and a firework. Okay, I have it down.
Yeah, no, it's really been amazing, and my life has been changed because of that opportunity, and
How
the
awesome is
life
that?
of
How awesome is that?
yeah.
I've always done a lot of community service, but for a long time I was ashamed of my past. Nobody wants to go into a corporate atmosphere and, hey, I'm an ex-con,
Right.
an ex-escort, prostitute / hoe, and whatnot. I focused on a lot of women's things, but not with the recovery community.
Yeah.
And we were talking about it before we started. And I don't want to get emotional. I don't sound as good. But when I was at True Colors, and I did go there for the ice cream, and to meet my crew rolls with the average age of 70.1, getting sobriety at 32. I'm really lucky. I have a really good foundation. Yeah. And I went to a gay men's meeting who just loved me for me and didn't want to sleep with me. So it was amazing. But that night, when I heard a little bit of your story, was when I changed what I wanted to do. Yeah, it was crazy. I was like, she can do it.
Anybody can do it.
No, it wasn't that. It was like, look at how proud she is of her journey. And I wanted to be proud of mine. I didn't switch that around until just a couple of years ago. And this year, it's 30 years out of prison, and I freaking want to have a freedom party, okay? Right. People don't realize until your freedom's taken what really life is about.
Yeah.
And I joke about it. They don't have a manicurist in jail, and I didn't like the color options or the shoes. But it's more than that. Being told when to eat, who to shower with, which is a ew for me to begin with.
But on the same token, it's that you needed that time out.
Oh, my
for
God,
you,
yes.
it was that time out that allowed you to overcome your addiction, or at least start the journey.
Yeah, and it's, for me, a big part of my work that I do too. Yes, advocating for the LGBTQ community, but also advocating for our adults in custody still. And last week, we were able to go Oregon State Correctional Institution, which is a men's facility in Salem, and my team and I were able to go in there and participate with the first Pride held on an Oregon State prison yard. And over 450 people showed up to that and supported and showed diversity and showed respect and inquisitive natures. And it was a really big eye-opener for me. And it's just, if individuals can show their best selves in the most ugliest places, we should be able to do that out here too.
Yes.
And not forgetting people that are still locked up.
I was in the prison right behind it.
Yeah.
So I was at the women's state prison before I went to boot camp at Chevy.
Wasn't it at OSCI? OSCI was the women's facility, wasn't it?
Yeah. You could see the men's penitentiary right there. Yeah. Luckily, I was only there for 2 weeks before I went to boot camp.
Yeah.
And I feel, just because I went to boot camp, because I was in a dorm and I worked 3 days a week, I went to school 3 days a week, I went to a religion thing, which I didn't choose my religion. I chose to learn all the religions. So Native American, I got to learn a lot of stuff. And so I graduated from prison, and it was really good. I probably wrote I don't know, we went with 86 people and 24 graduated, but I probably wrote 42 resumes. There was people that couldn't read and write, and you had to have one to graduate. And I was lucky.
Do you keep in contact with some of the original people you were with that inspired you? You said they were lifers or they were...
You know what? I haven't. When I first got out, it was a lot about, I focused a lot on me and a lot on my family. Every holiday season, my wife and I donate some money to somebody that impacted me in there. And just a surprise to put on their books. But I don't,
nice.
I haven't necessarily actually wrote letters to individuals in there. I haven't. But what I am doing is staying in contact with a lot of people that are making change in different facilities. So whether that be at OSP, OSCI, Coffee Creek, and there's some really big warriors in there right now that are advocating for people's rights and supporting each other no matter what their marginalization is, right? And so we have the Native American Club at OSCI supporting and paying for Pride and alcohol and drug seminar for the LGBTQ community, and we have the Lifers supporting the Native Club, and so it's a whole level of collaboration I'd never expected, and people are really showing their beautiful selves, and there's a lot of good things coming from that. For me, it's just I see this beauty in those facilities, but that's not to talk up the Department of Corrections, right? That's to talk up the people, right? Because what people should be getting access to is support, skill building, being able to go ahead and have some sort of recovery, and that is being denied to them, and people are fighting for that, and those people are those adults in custody. And I just wanted to really
I agree.
talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And after, I think there's a read, and then from people I've talked to, it seems like there's a disconnect, or there has been. It's getting better. But once you leave jail, prison, whatever the incarceration was, what do you do then?
Right.
You know, where do you live? And it's just like a path. It's like you said, the revolving door. It's like a path to just go out and come back in, go out and come back in. How do we break that cycle?
Yeah. And especially for LGBTQ plus individuals, especially for our trans and gender diverse population, because they don't have that nuclear family that is supporting them.
Yeah.
They don't have affirming housing opportunities. They don't have that stability to be able to go ahead and leave prison without the survival mentality instilled and completely fired up for them. And that's the fight that we're doing right now, is like, we need more housing opportunities for our community. We need more spaces that are safe and not triggering for our community. Judgmental, yeah. And there's a really big gap in services across Oregon for that. I'm really honored to be a part of an organization that is doing the work to go ahead and expand those services and those opportunities. But one organization isn't going to fix the problem for everyone.
Right.
And so we need other individuals to invest. We need the state to invest. We need to expand services. We need to talk about those barriers that our community is facing. Because if we're not talking about it, then it's not going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what do you think is one of the key, or is it just a collective? Is there a key area that people could focus on or start with? Because it seems almost overwhelming. Okay, you've said that, now what? It's
Right.
like, where do we start? Where do we go? What's next?
Yeah, it is overwhelming, and I think any space is a good place to start. And what we need is for individuals with experience or knowledge of specific sectors to show up, right? So if you have understanding about housing, if you are part of the LGBTQ community, if you've provided services to, or if you want to be a strong ally, let's have those conversations of how we can diversify that system. If you're within detox or you're providing therapy, let's talk about how we can diversify the system so that way we can provide services that are going to be responsive, supportive, and actually make an impact for individuals that don't fall within the binary.
Yeah. And how does True Colors then play into that?
Yeah. And where we play into that is that we try to go ahead and have as much representation for as diverse of a community as we are. So we're individuals that belong to the community that are providing services to the community, which means that our staff can have understanding of experienced stigma, experienced shame, their own recovery journey, their own identity journey, and being able to go ahead and share their stories with their participants, or even just affirm, hey, I've experienced that same feeling too. That's a common feeling within our community. Have you ever talked to anybody about these feelings before? Have you ever talked to an individual about the trauma that you've gone through, validating those things, and then being able to connect the dots. We don't provide a clinical services, but what we can do is connect you to professionals that we've heard have done a really great job with providing services to our community. We can get you connected to safe housing, safe treatment facilities. And we're trying to expand our housing as well, which is really big. We're in the process of it.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, we're just waiting for closing. You know how house goes. You don't want to. Yeah, but hopefully
It's hurry up and wait.
Let's hurry up and wait. Inspections, back and forth. And so,
Izzy was bragging about you.
Yeah.
Thought it was good.
That guy, he's a good guy. Yeah, hopefully before the end of the quarter or the end of the year, we'll be able to finalize that and provide another service.
Yeah, I like what you said about having someone that they can relate to, that has had this shared experience, and that was something
Peter
first,
wasn't very comfortable in his recovery at first.
Yeah, where I was in Gresham, and it was very conservative, and it also was there was a lot of old timers that were very by the book, unless you talked about what was in the book or only alcohol related. If you had any other kind of, no, it's not just, there's everybody. You talk to so many people, and I think it's more a combination than it is just one drug or whatever it is. And so when I met Dawn, who brought me over to the Lunch Bunch where I go now, it was like another gay man, so I could be fully open. I could share. He understood. So that having someone that went through the same experiences, had the same kind of life, dealt with the same kind of discriminations and so forth, that was huge for me. I attribute it in part to why I'm 7 years today. I don't know if I would have had the 7 years without being able to be so open and have that comfort of others, that I can say something. One person in the room, no matter how bizarre it is, the experience that I bring up, they're going to say, oh yeah, I've been there.
Yeah. And that's, that gave me that representation is why I came out. I came out in prison. Yeah, I was able to see other individuals that showed me that having a relationship with another person of the same sex is normal. There's nothing weird about it. There's nothing perverse about it. And so that's where I came out. But I still didn't even gain self-confidence until I was able to move up to Portland. Living in a small town, you hold your girlfriend's hand or you walk around and you still feel that feeling of unsafety. Even if it is your hometown and you're familiar with it, it's still uncomfortable. And I couldn't ever get over that. I was still wearing a mask even though I was out around my family, around everybody. And I remember going to Portland at PSU and I was just seeing what I consider kids, because I felt older at PSU, but I was seeing young adults that were just living their authentic selves and loving who they wanted to love and holding hands. And I was like, I remember walking down the road and I called my sponsor and I was like, I'm tired of still hiding in recovery and I just can't do that anymore. And it was a breaking point for me where I was just like, I'm either going to live my authentic self or I'm not going to live. And I want to live. So how do I do that?
Yeah, exactly.
And so it was really funny for me to fall into this career. I remember joking with Tony when he first hired me. I was like, I don't know if you hired the right person because I'm not professional lesbian. I don't know everything. I know nothing actually. And Tony just telling me, you'll figure it out. And my participants are the ones that taught me self-confidence, the ones that, I
love it.
Yeah, it was a really beautiful thing that chose to live 100% authentically, no matter the consequences, because the consequence of not being your authentic self internally was worse.
Yeah.
Can I tell you how proud I am of you? I'm going to tell you not my journey. First of all, went to Portland State at 17 and downtown swallowed me. And being professional and making sure that's all you saw, I don't think until when Peter and I did the first 3 podcasts, I felt naked. I felt like I was standing in front of Portland naked.
Actually, I would have rather been naked on the stage than tell my whole story as honestly as I did. Which the first the first 2 were our stories.
Oh, nice. Okay.
The first one was us together, and then we each did our full story. And
I bawled
to do this podcast. I'm like, if I'm not going to be fully open and honest with my story, how do I expect people to sit down and do the same? I'm going to have to do this. And that was a really tough decision to make, to put yourself public, because there's no backseat. So you're out there. And So
Our
people,
families, like my family didn't know I went to prison,
Oh,
let
yeah.
alone owned an escort service or 2 or 3 or 4.
My grandma used to tell her church members that I was off to college. I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen when I don't come home with a degree, but
So my mom
figure it
told
out.
everybody I had cancer. And it was so funny because I didn't know, right? And when I came home, everybody kept saying, "You look really good. You look really good." And I'm like, what the heck? But I had gone through boot camp and I came home looking like She-Ra.
Yeah.
And had my hair all cut off because they make you cut your hair, and I cried. But I didn't know until her best friend said, your mom told everybody you had cancer. And I was like, what? And so then it was very awkward, but she was so embarrassed and ashamed.
Yeah.
And my family is all from the East Coast, so none of them lived here. But
and most of the people I knew, it's like when I came out, they were like, tell me something I don't know. And I was also worried and nervous about, and the same thing with most people were like, yeah, we knew you hit the bottle a little. You could tell there was things going on. The end of the day.
being authentic. I really love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a child. I just wanted to be a good mom. I just invested all into her. So that was a diversion for me as well. That and climbing up the corporate ladder. Love it.
It's interesting because one of the big things or the goals in my recovery was to repair the damage that I did with my family. And my family is very conservative, but they still show up for me and show me authentic or unconditional love. And what I mean by that is, even though they may not agree with my lifestyle, even though if they have their own religious views, they still love me and they still want me to be happy and what makes me happy. And so when I stopped trying to hide myself and I started to live more authentically, I thought that it would create more of a disconnect with my family. And it did the complete opposite. I think my dad was finally was able to see that I wasn't just feeding him bullshit. And I was actually he was like, okay, this is your authentic self, and I'm going to accept that. I may never have grandkids, or I may never have this or whatever, but I can see you authentically, and you're not lying to me. And so that's been really great to be able to go ahead and build a friendship with my family versus just,
I love that. I love that. Yeah. My daughter's our biggest fan. She's our number one fan. It is good.
Yeah, even my mom, and she heard my story too, and she said, I cried a little bit through it, and I was a little bit shocked because she, didn't know half the stuff that went on, behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But she's, we're like this. I help her. She lives nearby. She's in her 80s, so I help her with her shopping or whatever it is she needs help with. And she's a big part, and I'm a big part of her life, which if I hadn't
flawless.
been honest first in coming out, which that was a big emotional. My dad was like about ready to disown me, did all but disown me at that point. But I had to be, I said, I can't live this way. And then when it came to the sobriety, I realized it's the same thing all over again. I can't, like you said, masks. I wore a mask throughout my entire life. I wore many masks because I was in a corporate environment where I had to deal with different areas, and I would be able to mask myself and fit right in with the good old boys or with apparel people or whatever it was. Being open, transparent, and there was definitely, I think, the negatives have not come anywhere near to outweighing the positives.
Right.
And anybody who holds me in some other view isn't worth my time anyway. So at this point, it's the way I look at it.
Yeah, it's a journey. It's such a journey. And these are the unexpecteds of recovery. When I got into recovery, I didn't give myself permission to be kind or to change, right? And all of a sudden these things started happening without my permission. And I'm like, what is going on? But it's that internal and that spiritual change that happened for me. Is just like, honesty is a virtue that I hold dearly. And if I can't be honest with myself, how can I expect honesty from others? And kindness. If I want kindness from others, I need to be kind to others. And the more that I value certain virtues, the more that it comes out of me. And we leave those fake virtues that we've experienced and developed from our addiction behind because they no longer serve us. And it's just interesting. The unexpected changes that happen just because you got some time in recovery and you start doing the work.
Yeah. Well, for me, I have this committee in my head. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
And they always want to take me
committee.
down this path, of negativity, and it's never going to work. It's never going to. So, trying to keep that in check and always look for that positive, know. it's a daily thing for me. I use meditation myself to help get through that, and my higher power being nature and connecting with nature. So that works for me to a degree, but it's a constant battle. I have to constantly address it. I'm curious, when you were doing your peer mentoring, is there a story or a person or something that sticks out for you? Maybe a success or something that just hit you that you hold in your heart? Or
there's one particular person, and I talked about like getting the self-confidence in myself by seeing the confidence in others. And this individual was one of my first participants, and when he first came to us, he hadn't transitioned, and he hadn't told his family, had long hair, was presenting feminine, didn't know what pronouns to use. And not because he didn't know which ones he wanted, but he was living with his family and just didn't feel safe or wanting. It wasn't the proper time to take that step for him. And we did our intake, and I asked what his pronouns are, and he's, I don't know right now. And I was like, okay, let's just take this as fast as you want to take it or as slow as you want to. If anything changes for you, let me know. And we ended up getting him a affirming haircut, and the smile went on his face. And he started asking me to use a specific name and use he, him pronouns. And so that way he can feel or figure out what it felt like, and he can have a safe place to go ahead and do that. And so we started using those, and slowly and gradually he started to go ahead and really see himself clearly, and found the courage to go ahead and come out to his family. And that was a rough patch, right? And we worked through that together and support, and it was just about having a safe place to go ahead and come to, and that really started to establish the beginning of his personal identity and his recovery. Because he was able to go ahead and take off those layers of safety and armor when he came to the center, and was able to go ahead and start really focusing on the goals that he wanted to accomplish in life. And that's the beauty of it, is like when people can take off that armor, not worry about the next minute, the next moment, the next day, they can start really planning long-term for their recovery. And it's so beautiful to see.
That's awesome. Yeah. I know when you can just be allowed to be yourself.
Yeah.
And I put so much energy into being somebody else. It was like being on stage 24 hours a day. And it takes a lot of effort and takes away from your own self-being and what you want to do in your life. It affects your journey in life.
I have one other question. I know that True Colors provides peer mentors, and Chris on our show said how you do it.
Yeah.
How many peer mentors do you get?
Do we have, or can people get?
No, do you have?
So we've got 4. So we have 6 altogether right now. So we're a pretty small team. So we have a total team of 12, 6 mentors, and that includes the 2 supervisors that I have that hold the smaller caseloads.
Okay.
And that's something that's a need for us, is to be able to go ahead and expand.
With the largest capita, that's why I was asking.
Yeah. That was back a few years ago. Right now, we're seeing a big spike in referrals. Our mentors are holding a caseload of 25 each, and we have about a 4-week wait list right now. I think we're working through a wait list of like 35 individuals. And so we definitely need more funding for more mentors. We need to expand, probably need a bigger center. We're growing out of that one a little bit, but we're opening up a new center. And so we've got goals for the future. I think it's easy to rush and be like, we need more, but I'm happy to say that we're almost at 2 years. I'll be 2 years in October, and my supervisors and my staff are finally comfortable and in what their position is and their job duties, and know how to handle situations that come up on their own. And so we're gearing up to have the skill set to be able to expand. And it's just about timing, right? We don't want to harm anybody because of our greed or because of a desire to go ahead and be bigger. We want to do things right, slowly, and in due time.
No, totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Is there anything you want our listeners to know from just you, and anything you want to send out?
You mean as in like a message or as an announcement?
All of the above. Okay. It's a free forum, girl. This is your free commercial.
Okay. We do have something exciting in the works for later on this year. So I was telling you all before we started the podcast, but we're holding our first recovery conference that will be held September 24th and 25th at the Holiday Inn by the Columbia. And so on Hayden Island, I believe is what it's on. And we are looking for individuals to go ahead and submit presentations, individuals that want to be keynote speakers to go ahead and participate. And our focus is the LGBTQ community. So there's a lot of 101 education out there, but we want to go ahead and dive a little bit deeper, talk about the barriers that each individual community faces, right? What are individuals that identify as gay or lesbian or bisexual experiencing? What is the transgender and gender diverse populations experiencing when accessing services? And so we'll be having our Out in Recovery conference, and we hope everybody will like to participate, show up for the first year. Tickets will go on sale next month. And yeah, we're just excited to see everybody and get our feet wet with the conference.
Yeah. Is the information going to be on the True Colors website, or is there another place?
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and put a link to the conference website on our True Colors platform, and we'll make it available to you all as well once that comes out.
Yeah. Put it on our site.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
We'll be providing CEUs too. So if anyone out there is needing continued education units, we're focusing on providing ethical delivery of service training and then several CEUs. It's a 2-day conference. So I'm thinking about 12 to 16 CEUs.
Love it.
And in talking in the past 4 months that we've been doing our podcast, and we were able to talk with several other different recovery people within different recovery centers. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me, the feeling I get is there's a lot of work to do, but there's hope. It seems like the light has been lit, and there's this anticipation of what's to come. How do you feel about that? Do you feel with what you're doing and what you're seeing in the community?
Oh, I'm excited. Thing is we get really wrapped up around the statistics and the need and the despair, especially providing these services. But I think the most attractive thing about our organization is the community that we build and the beauty that people experience and the hospitality that they're given when they enter into our community center and when they enter into community with us. And we're seeing community partners pop up. We're seeing individuals focusing on recovery for the LGBTQ community, programming representation into their organizations, and giving people in our community the freedom to go ahead and serve the community how they see fit or how the community needs. And I'm very ecstatic for it. And I hope to see other organizations pop up in places like Eugene or Ashland or Seattle, California, or whatever. And maybe you'll see us there too. But I'm very hopeful.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, this Saturday, the Glam Lot is
Oh,
presenting at True Colors.
Mm-hmm.
Very excited.
Yeah, one of the best drag collectives I've gone to. They're amazing. Yeah.
I love them.
Yeah, they know how to curate a space, I'll tell you that much. They have their decorations down. So
Yeah, they are amazing. We had Becca on our show. Her podcast actually goes out next week.
Oh, nice. Okay.
We actually really tried to do you right and do a bunch around True Colors. Yeah, no, we're happy to do it.
Yeah. No, we appreciate you taking the time to visit with us here on our humble podcast.
No, absolutely.
It's early days, and we keep growing little by little. And of course, my mind says you should be at 10,000 across the country. And it's only been 4 months, and we're on episode 17.
I don't think like that.
I think.
I'm always like, Peter, it's just fun.
I have ambitions.
Do you see how much we've done in 4 months? We're like a
very good.
nonprofit already. And so, yeah, I think that we have gotten the word out so good that I tell Peter, and Peter is the technical
I'm the geek
perfectionist.
self-prescribed geek behind the microphone.
And I'm the I love you and know you. So it
You
works
all
out.
are doing great. And yeah, the stories that you're able to highlight and bring to the forefront, like that's where hope is inspired, right?
Yeah.
That's our
Yeah.
goal. That is our
goal.
whole goal. It wasn't literally our first message was if you're in a car and you're thinking about suicide or using, maybe you'll just hear our podcast and get recovery instead.
Yeah.
That's the first thought we've had. In our community, I've seen a lot of people prison, death, or recovery.
And recovery's been so good to me. I know, and I
Well-
don't know why to this day that I get to stay other than I do the work, but how lucky are we?
Yeah.
Exactly. Any last words?
No, I think I'm all worded out. No.
Sounds
Well, again,
good.
thank
Yeah,
you so
no.
much for spending time with us. Really appreciate it. Peter on the Real Recovery Podcast with
Julie, have a good day.
and Amanda.
Thank
Thanks
y'all
again.
so much.
That's a wrap on today's episode. Thanks to each and every one of you for lending us your ears and hearts. Your engagement is what fuels our passion and keeps this podcast thriving.
We cherish the moments we share here and hope they resonate with you, whether you're on a daily commute, at the gym, or just taking a moment for yourself.
Make sure to head over to our website at realrecoverypodcast.com. While you're there, subscribe to our newsletter for the latest insights and uplifting stories from our community delivered straight to your inbox.
Click that subscribe button on your favorite podcast player too, so you can keep up with every new episode. It's your support that keeps our conversation alive and meaningful.
And if our stories have touched you, consider using the donate button on our site. Your contributions, no matter the size, are deeply appreciated. They help us continue our mission of sharing hope and healing.
Join us beyond the podcast and follow our journey on social media. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and on X, formerly known as Twitter. All the links are on our site, so you can stay connected and be a part of the Real Recovery community every day.
Your likes, shares, and comments not only spread the message of recovery, but also remind us that we're all in this together.
So, until we meet again, remember that recovery is a journey, not a destination, and we'll be here to accompany you every step of the way to recovery, real recovery.
Thanks for listening.